Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about refined sugars and what our real concerns are for those with metabolic health and why they're a problem. Because I think a lot of people realize this, most people do, but I see a lot of people who don't actually get it right in terms of the reasons why. And if we're going to be correct, we should have a good concept of this. And I mean, plus, if we don't know what the problem is, we don't know how to resolve it. So, right off the bat, people come up with the ideas, well, because there's simple sugars, they get blood sugar up really high, there's an insulin. No, that actually is not it. Uh, that's been way, way overhyped. And there's a specific reason why we're concerned with refined sugars and not necessarily all high glycemic index carbohydrates, because the response is not the same. So in fact, what we're looking at is the large amount of free fructose. And keep in mind, fructose itself directly in the bloodstream doesn't raise normal blood sugar, and it doesn't produce an insulin response at all. So just keep that in perspective when you're having that discussion. In fact, when fructose hits the bloodstream, your body can't really use it for anything. Your body has to convert it into glucose to do anything with it. So here's what we're looking at with this. It is the amount of fast absorbing fructose that's the concern. And again, notice I'm very specific when I said that. Fast absorbing fructose. That does not apply to, say, a banana. And that always puzzles me, you people who bring that up, and they talk about sugar content in fruit, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not really a concern. In fact, it's not even correlated with metabolic disease. You don't have any correlation in the data with people who eat large amounts of fruit with it causing diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance. It's not really correlated. So if that was the case, we would at least see it appear in the statistics. So that should be your first giveaway that that's not what's going on. And part of that is because with fruits and more whole foods, and in theory, if you added enough fiber, even to the refined sugar, you could make this true to some extent. But because it's in a more complete package, it takes longer to digest and break down, as opposed to just being cleaved into glucose and fructose by the stomach acids and hitting the upper intestine that way, which is what happens with table sugar and high fructose corn syrup. And again, I want to be clear, don't let people convince you that there's a big difference between the two. There really isn't. That is not a pro-sugar stance. It is simply saying that there's no real difference. They're both pretty much equally bad within a percentage or two difference. But even then, it's still a quantitative issue, right? We can handle a small amount of that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the issue with things like fruit and other stuff, it reaches your lower intestine. A lot of your gut flora, if it's healthy, is actually pretty good at fermenting fructose that reaches it and turning it into glucose. Why? Well, because we've developed to be able to do that over thousands or millions of years. Okay, because fructose did appear in our diet. Fruits did occur all through history for us, and we have mechanisms in place to deal with that because we need to be able to use that fructose for fuel, right? Our bodies are amazing at finding a way to turn everything that we eat into a fuel source. Again, so that we don't starve to death, right? And those who didn't have the ability to do so simply died out during different periods. So with the fruit, we end up fermenting a lot of it directly into glucose, so that by the time it gets to our bloodstream, there's less fructose there. There's just far less of it. So that reduces the fructose load in the bloodstream. But the faster absorbing refined sugars, you get a big hefty chunk of free fructose once the stomach acids and stuff get to it. So right there in the upper intestine, doesn't even fully reach the gut. Most of it gets absorbed very quickly. Now the glucose in there, our body handles it like any other glucose, but that fructose, it doesn't. So now it hits the bloodstream, and again, come back over to the handiness of nature. We have enzymes that can convert some fructose into glucose. They can cleave that enzymically, and guess what? It can convert a good chunk of it into glucose. Now people say, well, how much? We don't really have an exact number. It depends again upon genetics, metabolic health, a lot of other factors as to how much of that enzyme you produce. But we can handle some fructose hitting the bloodstream. Okay? And it's a reasonable amount, whatever amount, 10 grams or 20 grams or whatever that happens to be, person to person in a day. But again, it's also an absorption by the hour and minute. Because again, we only produce so much of that enzyme all throughout the day. Okay, that converts a lot of it to glucose. So then we're good because glucose is our normal fuel source. Our body handles it well. It's our primary fuel unless you're diabetic. It's not linked necessarily with any sort of disease or problems. We have to have it. Which is why our body tries to make other stuff into it. All right, so then the fructose is left over. The question becomes then, what happens to it? And then it hits the liver. Because we can't use it, really. We can't use it as a fuel source. Our liver, however, is great at detoxifying things and converting them into useful stuff. So our liver has the ability to convert fructose. So whatever's left hits the liver. The liver can convert it into glucose. But it puts a load on the liver. It requires work, just like everything the liver does. And the liver is a very robust organ. Again, keeps us alive. Very effective tools. Very good to have a liver. Very good to have a healthy liver. It converts that, other toxins, alcohol. Actually, alcohol and fructose go through a very similar process. And in excess, they produce the same effect in the liver. Elevates liver enzymes, causes fatty liver. It's sclerosis of the liver if it's alcohol, but high amounts of refined sugars can do the same thing if they're chronic and they're excessive. So then what ends up happening? When we get fatty liver, then we start getting insulin resistance. Then we start getting metabolic syndrome. Then we start getting all these effects. We start, again, having the problems that we don't want. This then predisposes us to being lethargic, overeating, fat gain, metabolic diseases. And the fructose itself isn't really creating body fat in the body. Dietary fat is doing that. But it certainly can impact the metabolic machinery in such a way that it makes it way easier to get fat. And therein lay the problem. This is how it contributes to all of that, and contributes to diabetes and other metabolic disease also. Because as we start to develop problems with that, then we'll start eating more fat. We'll start eating more of the saturated fats and the stuff that contributes dramatically to body fat gain, type 2 diabetes. And then we just create a vicious cycle. Then we have problems. So when people look at what's going on with fructose and specifically refined sugars, it's not because of the insulinogenic response of them. It is the impact of the excessive fructose that our liver has to handle the load of. And again, we have these other pathways in place to do that, and our liver can handle a small amount of it without negative effects. It can't handle large amounts of it for extended periods of time. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.